Thank you for joining us. We would love to hear how God is working in and through your life by sharing your story with us at story@awakenchurch.cc. I want to thank you for joining us, and we hope that you love today's message.
And would you turn to your neighbor? I know that we had a lot of people come in after the welcome time this morning. It's our hope that this would feel like family to you. So before I start preaching, I'm going to ask you just to look at a couple people around you. Tell them good morning. Tell them Happy New Year. Tell them they look good, even if they don't. Everybody needs to hear it. So maybe just take a moment and say, hey. Hey, this is going to be a good year for a lot of people. Hopefully for all of you, but I was out worshiping, looking up here at the stage, and saw a couple that was leading us in worship behind me. Mark and Sarah got engaged over Christmas. Man, that's exciting, right? I know there's other weddings taking place in the church and people pregnant, and it's just exciting. I mean, some of you guys are about to have an amazing year. And for some of you, you're going to step into some things that you've been dreaming about and praying about, and God's going to allow it to happen this year. And I'm excited, man. One of the things I love about church, one of the things I love about the family of church is we get to celebrate things together. You know, what's a win for you is a win for me. And man, when I see God doing something great in your life and you see God doing something great in my life, we should celebrate those things, right? Not only do we pray for each other, but we celebrate the praises as well. I love that part of our worship service. Today, we're starting a new series, actually launching a new series called Learning to Lead. And you may say, well, I'm not a leader. I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to lead a small group, or I don't want to lead at church, or I don't want to lead a team. I just want to sit. Listen, this is the premise of the whole series. We say at Awaken Church, leadership is discipleship. In other words, if you're leading somebody, you're discipling them. The word disciple, and I don't want to take you to seminary right now, but the Greek word disciple is a word that's mathetes. Everybody say mathetes. You learned Greek today. Go tell somebody else, hey, my church is great because I learned Greek today in church. This is what mathetes means. It's where we get our word mathematics. It means to learn from, both formally and informally. So leadership, when you think about leading, you're teaching somebody something formally or informally. I think about as a dad, I'm leading my kids. My 12-year-old son, I teach him things formally, but also teach him things informally. It's what I say and it's what I do. Those of you that are leading businesses or leading teams or leading groups, you lead in what you say and you lead in what you do. Discipleship is no different. As disciples, you lead by what you say and you lead by what you do. In other words, if you're going to disciple somebody, you listen to what they teach and you watch what they do. When we look at Jesus making his 12 disciples, they not only watched how he lived, they also listened to what he taught. Leadership is discipleship. Our hope for you as you come to church and get engaged in church is not that you would just attend church, but that you would step into making disciples the way Jesus called us to. That's the hope. The hope is that one day you'll be able to look back and go, man, God used me to help teach other people about who he is. And he used me to help advance the kingdom of God. That's what this church is really about. This church was started a little under 6 years ago with a small group of people. And the mission was to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And what's happened is God's built a church that's not built on the skills of a few, but the sacrifices of many people. And people who have embraced this calling to lead and disciple and make disciples in this community. That's what this entire series is about. How can we learn to lead better? I want to start by asking a question. How many of you make New Year's resolutions? Just put your hands up. Just raise your hand if you got New Year's resolutions. I'm not going to ask them what they are, so I'm not going to call on you. Just go ahead and put your hands up high. This is amazing. I'm intrigued. Go ahead and put them down. I'm intrigued because I thought there'd be more hands. I really did. And the 9:15 service. 9:15 is a little sleepy crowd, so sometimes they don't respond as quick. You guys slept late. You got your coffee. You're good to go. But I'm surprised. I thought there'd be more hands, but what I'm realizing is more and more people just go, you know what, I'm not going to make a New Year's resolution. I'm already amazing. Or I'm not going to make a resolution because I don't want to be accountable if it doesn't work out. Or I'm not going to say I'm going to lose 25 pounds because I like eating and I don't want to be held accountable. I don't want to. Less people make resolutions because people just don't want to fail. And isn't it amazing? Sometimes we just won't make resolutions because we don't want to let ourselves down. Here's my proposition to you. Most resolutions have to deal with the things that matter most to us, right? When I think about my resolutions for 2019, it's like, I want to be a healthier version of me a year from now than I am now. My word for the year, so to speak, is better. I want to be a better man of God, a better husband, a better dad, a better pastor, a better leader. I just want to be a better version of myself. That means physically I want to take care of myself more. I want to go to the gym more regularly, eat more healthy, right? That's important to me. I want to be a better husband. I want to love my wife better, serve her better, prioritize date nights better. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better dad. I want to be able to disciple my kids better, my sons better, my daughters better. I want to be more present in their lives, and I want to be a better pastor. I want to focus more on what God wants for this church and be in his word more and pray more. And these are things that are incredibly important to me. And you have a list that I'm sure is important to you. Here's what happens most resolutions. We state these things that are really important to us, but as the year progresses, what happens? They start to fade away, right? Like right now, you want the spring break body. And then when spring break comes, you'll go, okay, I'll go for the July beach body. And then Thanksgiving comes and you're like, just forget about it. I don't even care because we got January 1 coming again, right? It's this cycle. But what's important now gets pushed aside because so many other distractions come into our lives. And that's the irony of these New Year's resolutions. Every year, it's like we need to be reset or recalibrated back to the things that are most important because most of our lives get cluttered up by things that aren't really that important. They're actually urgent. This series, we're going to be talking about a couple different topics. We're going to talk about the importance of praying now or paying for it later, making decisions without God's counsel. We're going to talk about the importance of having discipline in our lives so they don't have regrets later. Think about being disciplined with habits so you don't have regrets for not having those habits later. We're going to talk about the importance of surrendering to God or having control and dealing with anxiety and worry and stress and the importance of surrendering our lives and surrendering our plans to him. Each week we're going to tackle different topics about how we can be better leaders ourselves as we learn to be disciples of Jesus. But today I want to talk about the importance of choosing what's important over what's urgent. Like New Year's resolutions are incredibly important to us, but we end up not doing them. Why? Because things that are urgent or distractions come into our lives. What's amazing is if I were to ask you right now, what's the difference between what's important and urgent? Most people, the things that are urgent are important, right? So if right now you went out to the parking lot and you left and you went to leave and you started your car and your engine blew up, you'd be like, man, that's really important. I got to deal with that, right? Unless the church can give me a new car. I got to deal with that. Which we're not doing that. So that's an important situation, but it's actually an urgent situation because what's important is car maintenance. What's important is changing your oil every 3,000 miles, right? And if you don't change your oil every 3,000 miles, eventually what's going to happen is your engine will blow up. If you don't do what you say is important, which is maintain the car, eventually you're going to deal with what's urgent. Or let me give you a personal example. As someone who cares about my health and well-being, when the flu season comes around, someone who says health is important should probably get what? A flu shot, right? I'm not saying that you have to, and we're not going to get in an argument about vaccinations right now, but typically it's like, okay, it's flu season, I'm going to go get a flu shot. That's important to me. Well, I don't have time to do that, or I didn't make time to do that. And so what happened in my life the weekend before Christmas, during our Christmas services, was I got the flu. And so on the Friday before Christmas, I'm in my bed shaking. My wife, who is a saint, is just pumping meds and fluids into me. And I'm dealing with this urgent situation because I didn't do what was actually important to me, right? If you don't deal with what's important, you're going to be forced to deal with what's urgent. Or think about a marriage. You say, man, my marriage is really important to me. I want to have a great relationship with my wife or with my husband. And so as a part of that, I'm going to prioritize a date night. I'm going to prioritize conversations, and I'm going to make sure we're on the same page spiritually and moving in the right direction. Well, if you say that's important, but you don't pay attention to that and prioritize that, eventually you're going to end up dealing with the urgency of marriage counseling, or the urgency of this isn't working out, or the urgency of impending separation. What I want us to see is, as we talk about leading, it starts with us. So many times when we talk about leadership, the thought is, how can I lead other people? How can I lead 10 people or 20 people or hundreds of people or lead at a company or lead on a team? Let's talk about us first. How do we lead ourselves? How can we be better disciples ourselves? And I think the first thing you have to answer, and what we're going to try to answer today, is what is most important in my life? What's most important in my life? There's a story in Scripture that I want to highlight where Jesus speaks specifically to a couple sisters about this very particular issue, about what's most important and how our focus needs to be on that thing that's most important. If you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to open up to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. Luke is one of the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Luke was a doctor, so as Luke writes his Gospel, he includes certain details that the other guys don't. And I love the details of this story because particularly for the women in the room, you'll be able to identify. And it's not that the men don't care about a clean house or the men don't care about dinner. I'm not saying that, but we're talking about two sisters and two females. And I just love the fact that Luke includes some details that probably will hit home for all of us. So Luke chapter 10, verse 38, let me read the story to you. Now, as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Let me give you the picture. Jesus would travel town to town, city to city with his disciples. He had 12 disciples. That was his close group. There was usually about 70 others that followed with him. But in this case, we've got Jesus and his 12 disciples. So a party of 13 people have showed up outside of Martha's house. Martha makes a decision. Y'all come on in. So she's just essentially said, I'll take all you guys in. We'll have dinner, hospitality, whatever. She was thankful to have Jesus there at her home. She welcomed them into her home. Verse 39. Now her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner that she was preparing. And she came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. How many of you guys have ever hosted a small group at any church or this church? Just would you lift your hands? You hosted a small group? Yeah, we have tons of small groups here. A lot of you guys have been so kind to open your homes or your apartments. And one of the struggles of hosting a small group, my wife and I hosted one for, almost 5 years. We now host the middle school boys group on Thursday night. Please pray for me. Pray for my home. Pray for my wife. Most small groups, when you have people coming over to your house, the host goes, okay, we gotta clean this place up, right? We gotta organize, like the couches need to be in the right place, all the pillows need to be in the right place, that lamp's off, this lamp is on, all that crap goes in the closet, all the kids, let's just pretend we don't have any, throw all their stuff in the room, shut the door. You just scramble, whatever you gotta do, like, it's like a facade. That ain't what your house ever looks like. Right? But when the small group comes over, it's perfect. It's good. We staged it, got a candle, got worship music going, whatever, right? It's like, this is such a great house. What? Honey, why isn't our house like this? It's because your house don't host small group. You host small group, your house will be like that at least once a week, right? Middle school boys group, we don't do anything. We're like, look, it's going to be in worse shape no matter what, so we'll just clean up afterwards, But can you imagine for a moment, Martha is at her house. She sees Jesus coming with his disciples. She's heard about this man who claims to be the Son of God. She's heard about his teaching, heard about his preaching. Mary has too. Martha says, okay, come on in. Come on in. This is an honor for you to be here. I'll make dinner. And so all the disciples are in there, and Jesus is in the living room, and Mary's sitting in Indian style, listening to everything, that he's saying. And Martha's in the kitchen just banging pots and pans away, wanting Mary to know, hey, it's a lot of work in here, Mary. It'd be great if you came and helped. Hey, Mary, you want to set the table? We got 13 people, maybe make the drinks, put out napkins, silverware. You want to do anything, Mary? Mary's just sitting there. Just listen to Jesus, spending time with Jesus. Some of y'all husbands can identify with what I'm saying right now. We're just watching the game. That's cool, babe. You need me to come in there? Yes. If you can hear noise in the kitchen, you're needed, all right? That's a little marriage tip for all you fellas, all right? But Mary's in the living room sitting with Jesus. Martha gets mad, goes into the living room, and with Mary sitting there, looks at Jesus and says, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here? She was there. She just sits here while I do all the work. Tell her to come and help me. Y'all ever told Jesus to do something? Tell her to come help me. What in the world? And Jesus looks back at Martha, and I don't want you to forget these words because so often in our lives, I think the battle again is what's important versus what's urgent. This is what Jesus looks back at Martha and says in front of Mary. He says, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. And Martha, I'm surprised, did not just run out of the house or slap somebody because she got corrected in front of Mary, who's been sitting there the whole time. Now, what's crazy is those of us who are type A planners, detailed, right? If that's you, we read this story and quickly get a little frustrated. Like dinner had to be made. Somebody had to make dinner. Somebody had to feed everybody. Somebody had to clean the kitchen. Mary's lazy. She's sitting there just hanging out with Jesus. Mary, get up. We got work to do. I look at it and I'm like, Jesus, why couldn't you tell Mary to go work and make the dinner? And then at the dinner table, then everyone could partake in the teaching and everyone could enjoy your presence. But it's not fair that Mary got you and I'm in here working. And anybody else identify with that a little bit? It's a little bit of a tension because it had to be done. It's work that had to take place. And I think for our lives, it's kind of that way. Most of us are distracted by the most important things, not by bad things. In fact, I'm convinced that the plan of Satan is not necessarily to make you do bad things. Oh, if I can just get all those church people, man, if they'll just all start getting drunk and they'll all start sleeping around and they'll all just, if I can get them doing all that stuff, I don't think that's the plan of the enemy. I think Satan just goes, if I can just make them really distracted and busy, they won't do anything worthwhile for the Lord. If I can just make them busy, they'll forget what they say is important on Sundays. I'll just busy them out to where they're irrelevant during the week. I think that's more the plan of the enemy. Jesus looks at Martha and says, Martha, Martha, Martha. Martha, Martha, Martha. You're distracted by this dinner. Hey, the dinner's not bad. I'm thankful for it. This is just better. Mary's made a decision that's better. Mary's realized, hey, my time here is not going to be forever. I know we can have a lasagna and breadsticks, and I know you're making all that stuff, but we probably could just eat crackers and enjoy this. You don't have to do all that. That's not necessary. And I think when we look at ourselves and we look at our lives and start to really ask, how can I lead better? How can I disciple better? How can I have a greater impact for the Lord in my life? We really have to step back and ask that question. What is important in my life, and how can I dictate that from what is urgent? In other words, how can I know the difference between what's important and what's urgent? And what I want to do is just highlight 3 different things that practical. I told you this is going to be a series that's very looking at Scripture and being very principled according to godly principle in Scripture. We'll be looking at Proverbs in the weeks to come and some of Paul's writings in the weeks to come, his letters to the churches about how to live godly lives. We're going to look at Jesus. He's the greatest leader that ever lived, turned the world upside down, left disciples that did the same thing, advanced the church. It's going to be a lot of principles about leadership, but also very practical things that you can do, we can do, to help us be better leaders and better disciple makers here in this community. And so if you're taking notes, there's 3 things I really want to ask you to write down today that maybe you can go and put into practice if you're interested in being a better leader and follower of Jesus. The first one is this. You go, how do I know what's important from what's urgent? How can I tell the difference? The first step is this. You've got to define it and declare it in your life. You've got to take time to define what's important and then declare what's important. In other words, some of you would say, well, what's important in my life right now, I want to lose 25 pounds by summer. And you've made that decision and you know it, but no one else knows it. You haven't told anybody, right? Did you know, like when you go to the gym, there's personal trainers everywhere. You ever wonder why there's personal trainers? So they can kick you in the tail when you don't show up at the gym. They don't know that much more than you. They know to do push-ups and sit-ups and squats and eat right and run. And they claim to know a lot of stuff. But you can find that stuff on the internet. Their main goal, their main purpose is, hey, you coming Tuesday? Or hey, where were you Tuesday? Right? It's accountability. And I think when you say what's important, people need to know about it. If you're married and one of your resolutions, what's important to you is to have a healthy marriage, you might want to tell your wife or your husband, hey, this is important to me. I'm going to define this as important to me. If it's your spiritual walk, listen, it's 2019, the first Sunday of 2019. I'm convinced that if you're here today, that your walk with God or your spiritual relationship with God matters to you. I'm convinced that if you're here today, something made you say, you know what, I want to go to church because this matters to me. This is important to me. And did you know that in June, church attendance won't be necessarily what it is today? Not to say we're not going to grow as a church. We will grow as a church between now and June. But some of the people who are in churches across the world right now on this day won't be in church in June. You know why? Because what's important to them today, what's important to you today, will fade if you haven't defined its importance and declared it to people around you. So what I'm encouraging you to do today is this. Sometime today, tonight, maybe in the morning, if you get up early, take time to define what is important to you. What is important to you? Your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse. You want to be a better dad, want to be a better wife, want to be a better leader at your workplace. Whatever's important, define it, write it down. And I want to encourage you to do this. Find a way to declare it. Maybe you write it on the mirror in your bathroom. That's accountability, by the way. You write, I want to lose 25 pounds on your mirror in your bathroom. When your son sees you eating an Oreo, he'll let you know, hey, you mean that or not? Maybe you put it on a sticky note in the car. You remember back in high school, you had your little picture of your girlfriend in front of the speedometer because she mattered? Some of y'all were like, I married her. Good for you. Most of us didn't. It mattered to you, so you put it in front of the speedometer. That's why you got a ticket. Listen, write down, hey, my faith is important. Praying is important. My marriage is important. Put it on a sticky note and put it in your car. People will ask about it. Your kids will ask about it. Your friends will ask about it. Maybe put it on social media. Facebook has a way of reminding you a year later of what was important last year. And it could be that January 6, 2020, you need to be reminded, last year I started off in church. Maybe I should get back. See, whatever it is that's that important, take time to define it. When we look at Jesus' life, one of the things I love about Jesus was his laser focus on what God had called him to do. Can you imagine showing up as the Son of God, the Word of God? So every single word in the Old Testament, Jesus knew. Jesus would teach and preach with authority, had the power to heal anybody that he wanted, meet every single need that existed. Can you imagine how pulled he was in different directions? But Jesus didn't meet every need. Jesus didn't teach in every context. He didn't stay in every city. He moved on from place to place. There's an account in Mark chapter 1. I want to read it to you because it's so important. In Mark chapter 1, we're told that Jesus got up and he went off by himself to pray. This is what Jesus would do. He'd get up and he'd go spend time talking to the Father. He said, at another account, he said, I and the Father are one. What you see me doing, the Father's told me to do. He would talk to God, his Father, about what his will is every single day. And in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, this is what we find. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and he went out to an isolated place to pray. And later, Simon and the others went out to find him. When they found Jesus, they said, look, everyone's looking for you. Jesus, how dare you go off and pray? People are looking for you. There's needs. We got stuff to do. But Jesus replied in verse 38, we must go on to the other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That's why I came. So he traveled throughout the region of Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and casting out demons. In other words, Jesus took his marching orders not from people, but from his Father. And I think so often we take our marching orders from people as opposed to God. Jesus knew for a fact, this is what I've come to do, and he declared it when it was necessary. Another time when the Pharisees were trying to dictate what his mission was and what he should be doing, Jesus said, look, I've come to seek and save those who are lost. Jesus knew this is what I'm about. I'm about my Father's business. Don't try to distract me by the urgent. Jesus knew what was important. And I think for us, if we're going to be great leaders, great disciples, great disciple makers, we've got to make a decision. This is what matters in my life. Take time to actually write it down, and then take time to make it known. When you sign up to get in a small group in 2 weeks, tell the small group, this is what's important to me. If you don't have a small group, I would encourage you to get in one. Or maybe you sign up for a team here at Awaken Church to serve on a team. Tell your team, hey, this is important to me. I want to serve in the local church. That way when you miss, you embrace the accountability. Hey, where were you? Said it was important. If you're here today, I would say tell your spouse, man, church is important. That way when the temptation comes up to miss, you can have the accountability. Listen, you said this mattered to you. Define what's important. Declare what's important. That's the first thing. Second thing is this. If you want to be a better leader, check your yes. Everybody say check your yes. Check your yes. Most people are so quick to say yes to things. Anybody like that in the room? You go, I got asked to do something. Yeah, I'll do it. I'm there. You want to get dinner? Yeah, let's get dinner. You want me to do what? Oh, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. People pleasing is an epidemic. And most people will just say yes before they'll even think of saying no, because if I say no, what are you going to think about me? Back when we started the church, I had a real problem with this. I had this twisted mentality that in order for everyone to stay at the church, right, because when you start a church, there's nobody there. So as they come through the doors, it's like, okay, I want to do everything I can to ensure these people love our community and love the family of Awaken Church, and they stay. And so I kind of subconsciously made it my mission just to do everything they wanted. And so on a Sunday, this is what it would look like. On a Sunday morning, we'd come to set up church, and there was volunteers, faithful volunteers, setting up a gym and taping wires and putting up speakers and lights and, putting out chairs. And inevitably, I would end up talking with some volunteers, and before you know it, it's like, hey, man, I'd love to get together with you. Can we get together and have breakfast? Yeah, when do you want to do that? I don't know, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday? Yeah, let's do it on Tuesday. Great. Committed to a breakfast on Tuesday. Then we'd have church service, and after church service, I'd be outside meeting VIPs, first-time guests, and, we'd really love to come have lunch with you, hear a little more about your story in the church, and, yeah, let's do that. When do you want to do that? I don't know, what, Wednesday, Thursday? Yeah, let's do it Wednesday. Wednesday's great. Okay, great. Locked in on Wednesday. Hang out, volunteers tearing down. After church, everything's done, and before you know it, I committed to another coffee with another volunteer, and then I would leave and go home. And when I get home, I'd talk to my wife, and Ashley's like, yeah, babe, I talked to this couple, and we're going to dinner on Thursday with them. And, oh, really? Okay, cool. She said yes to that, and I said yes to 3 appointments. And before you know it, we're sitting there going, I don't even want to face this week. Because I was working a full-time job and had 3 kids and coaching 2 ball teams. And it's like the calendar just got bombarded. Why? Because there was not a clear definition on what was most important in our lives. There were nights where I would forego having dinner with my wife and 3 kids because I committed to a meeting on a Sunday that I probably had no business committing to at the time. Or there were times where it was really important to me to be healthy, and the only time in my schedule at the time that I could go to the gym was in the mornings, and I committed to 2 breakfasts that totally interrupted that, and it couldn't happen. Or I committed to a lunch on a Tuesday when Tuesday was staff lunch, the closest relationships to lead the church, and I was pushing that aside because I was doing what was urgent in other people's minds. Now, if you ask, and many of you have, you've been there on the receiving end where I'll say, hey, let me check my schedule, or maybe shoot me an email or a text and we'll line something up. And I got some great counsel early on from a pastor. Pastor Dick Lincoln at Shandon Baptist Church told me this. He said, look, don't be so quick to say yes to everybody. It's actually an insecurity that you say yes so quickly. Just check your yes. Here's a little pro tip, 3-second pause. Somebody says, hey, can you do something? Just take 3 seconds. Your friendship won't end in those 3 seconds. Take 3 seconds before you decide. And maybe your calendar's open and you can do it. But maybe the better way is, hey, look, let's figure out a time to make that happen. And it gives you a chance to just step back and go, hey, I want to make sure I'm not selling out the family or selling out another appointment. I don't double book myself and end up having to back out of commitments. Just check your yes. One of the things I love looking at Jesus' ministry, was that so many times there were so many needs that needed to be met, he didn't do them all. Like there's the account of Jesus going to the pools of Bethesda. He walks up to a 38-year-old man and says, do you want to get well? Guy says yes. Jesus heals him, walks away. You know how many paralyzed people were at the pools of Bethesda? And it seems bad that we're like, well, Jesus just walked by him? Why didn't he heal everybody? Jesus didn't heal everybody. Jesus didn't meet every single need that existed. Jesus didn't preach and teach everywhere he was pulled to. I'm convinced he didn't accept every invitation to religious leaders' homes to eat, maybe even to sinners' homes to eat. He was one man, he could only do so much. And I think for us, if we really step back at our lives and go, man, I want to have time to spend with Jesus. I want to have time to make disciples. We've got to be better managers and leaders of our own lives and our own schedules. We've got to figure out a way to better get a handle on our own schedule so that God can actually use us. You know what I've found is that everybody's busy. I was having breakfast Friday morning with Greg Mooneyham. Greg's been at this church literally since our first Sunday. And we had breakfast Friday morning, and Greg said, you know, I know you're busy. I know you're a busy man, but I really appreciate the time to get together. And I said, Greg, you know, I hear that a lot. You're busy too. And here he is. He's first year of marriage, no kids, you know. You know everybody's busy. You know teenagers are busy. Ask them to do something. Ask them to do yard work. They're busy. You know college students are busy. Take 12 hours of classes a week. 12 hours y'all are in class. How y'all so daggone busy? College students, right? No, I'm kidding. We have great college students here, but you ask a college student, you know, they'll commit, but they're busy too. Newlyweds, they're busy, right? Parents, first kid, they're just trying to survive. They're busy, they're drowning, they don't have time. Parents that have multiple kids, everybody's busy. And I think if we really step back, we have to ask the question, why? Like, why is my schedule so full? Or why don't I have margin? You know, the thing that's preventing most people from being effective disciple makers is just a lack of time. And what's interesting is we all have the same amount of time in a given week. We just prioritize what we think is important with that time. And I want to really just challenge all of us. I'm included. I'm in this with you. I don't have this figured out, by the way. But I want to really challenge and encourage all of us to step back and go, man, how am I utilizing my time? And am I using my time on what's most important? And if what's most important is my relationship with God, and what's most important is doing what he called me to do, let's create some margin in our schedules to actually do that. If we define that as important, then we'll create time and work that time around it. If you say that your marriage is important, not having time for a date night's never an excuse. You go, I don't have money for a date night. Listen, a divorce is more expensive. So, and that's harsh, but that's true. You know, if you want to prioritize being a good father to your kids, make time for it. But I'm telling you, for you to do the most important things, you're going to have to say no to some urgent things. You're going to have to say no to some urgent. To give your best self to the things that you say are important, you've got to check your yeses. You cannot say yes to everything. Because you're going to say yes to a lot of things, end up having to back out of commitments. It's going to create anxiety, create insecurity, create overwhelmed. And then what you do give yourself to, you can give a lesser version of yourself to. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So we're going to define what's important. We're going to declare it. Right? Write it down, put it somewhere. We're going to check our yeses, make sure our yeses line up with what we say is important. And then this is the last thing that we're going to do. Last practical point is to always err on the side of what's important. Always err on the side of important. Now, here's the reality. The band's going to be coming up. Y'all might wonder why they walk over there every Sunday. They're coming to lead us in worship. If you're going to lead anything in life, whether it's, well, let's just start with yourself. All of us are leaders, right? So if you're going to lead yourself well, there's going to be times where you hit this conflict between, okay, I said this is important, but this is something urgent that's collided in my life. If you're leading, let's say you're leading in a business, right? And let's say you're a CEO or you're an entrepreneur and you're leading a nonprofit. There's going to be things you go, this is really important, but this came up and this is urgent. And now there's this collision. Or maybe you're leading at home. Let's say that you're a husband, you're a father, and you're leading your family. And you go, man, that's priority, that's important. Stuff's going to come up. You're gonna have to work late sometimes. Sometimes you gotta pull overtime. Sometimes you gotta figure out a way to make it happen. I wanna encourage you to err on the side of what's important. Let me give you an example. Let's say, okay, family dinner is important. So let's just say for your house, you said Tuesday night, I'm gonna have dinner with my husband and wife, or I'm gonna have dinner with my wife and husband and kids, right? Like, say that's a priority that you set. But you go to Boeing, or you're in sales, and you got a late sales call, or you got a project that runs late. What do? You can't just walk out on your job, right? Some of y'all are like, I will. Don't do that. She would rather you miss the meal, okay? But what I'm saying is, you don't just ignore the fact that something that you said was a priority and that's important. You don't just ignore that that's not going to happen. What I'm encouraging you to do is take the time to step out and make the call and, hey, babe, look, I know I said this is important. I regret I can't make it. We had this thing come up at work. We're going to reschedule it because it's that important to me, and I'm going to try to figure out a way for this not to happen again. Be amazed at how much mileage you get out of that, right? Versus just, well, it's just the way it is. It's the way it is. I can't control it. No, you can control your response to it. Or let me give you another example. Several years ago, is that back 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Seattle and speak at this men's conference. I was super excited about it. I don't get a lot of asks like that, especially Seattle. Seattle's a cool place. Starbucks. And I love Starbucks, guys, by the way. Better than any coffee shop in Charleston. All these hipsters are like, Merck and Mash is amazing. It's good, but it ain't Starbucks. Starbucks, no matter where I go in America, I get the same thing. It's awesome. And I was going to the birthplace of Starbucks and was going to get to flip fish in the market and be at this men's conference, these hundreds of men, and speak on just godly character and being a pastor and a husband and a dad. And man, I was stoked about it. I was so excited about it. I committed to it in like February or March. And it was supposed to be for September. And so as the time progressed, the summer came, my boys decided they wanted to play tackle football. And wouldn't you know that the opening weekend of the season, the opening weekend for Braley and Bryson to strap on helmets and take the gridiron for the first time, fell on the exact same weekend as this conference in Seattle. So here I am going, oh boy, we have a predicament now. Because what's most important in my life is being a godly husband and godly dad. Even more than this platform, believe it or not. And I've got, okay, they only have one dad that can be there, and yet I've committed to speak at this conference in Seattle. What do? I err on the side of what's important. And I'll never forget picking up the phone, and calling Rick Moreno at North Shore Christian Church in Seattle. So Rick, how you doing, man? Good. We're so excited to have you in a month for the conference. Yeah, I know, I am too. Hey, here's my predicament. The very reason you've asked me to come out there is the reason that I can't. Because that weekend, my boys are playing ball, and I just feel like I need to be here. And so I want to know how I can help you find another speaker for your conference, because I'm not going to be able to make it. Oh, Brandon, yeah, that's okay, you know. And he was so gracious and so understanding. And you know what happened? They got another speaker for their conference, and it went amazing. And I was on the sideline for the ball games, and it was amazing. And I filled a role that was important in my life that no one else could fill for my boys. A day that I could never get back if I would have missed. But you know, if you don't define what's important in your life, when those situations come, somebody else will define it for you. And it doesn't mean that you just back out of every commitment. It doesn't mean that you just, get all flaky and cop out on what's important. But whenever I can look at a Rick and say, Rick, look, this is what's most important in my life, and you know this. This is why you asked me to come speak. This is why I got to bow out. It brings understanding to the people whenever you actually do have to back out of what at the time seems urgent. And what I want to say to you is this. As you think about what this means for you personally, it really does all start back in this place of like listing it out, taking time to go, this is what matters most in my life. And I want to encourage you in this place. Again, I've got, as a pastor on this platform, and it's the first Sunday of 2019, I can say this. What you made a priority this morning, or actually what you probably made a priority this past week and yesterday to be here, lead in what's important. Let it be your relationship with God, because that shapes everything else. It shapes everything else in your life. And it doesn't mean you have to be in church every single Sunday. We're not legalistic like that. Listen, life happens, and we travel, and we have fun on vacation. That stuff happens. But what I'm saying is at the top of your list of what's important, really consider, is my relationship with God the peak of importance in my life? Because if it is, everything else will flow from that. That's the key to leading well. It's the key to loving well. It's the key to discipling well and serving well and giving well. It all flows from that place. And so as you contemplate what's important, start there. And maybe in these moments as we close up this service, you're thinking, I need to come back to a place where I make God important in my life. I need to come back to a place where I say He is the priority, and I do want a relationship with Him, and I want to know how He teaches me to live, and I want to know more about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. If that's you, I just want to pray for you right now. And you don't have to necessarily pray this prayer along with me, but you can agree with it in your heart. And God knows our hearts, and He measures our hearts, and He knows our motivations. And so would you just join me in prayer real quick? For the person who's in the room right now, and you would say, man, I want 2019 to be a better year. I want to be walking in step with God. I want to know more about Jesus. I want to know His plan for my life. I want to invite you just to agree with this prayer right now. Say, dear God, I love you, and you are important to me. Knowing who you are and knowing your word, knowing your plan, your will for my life is important to me. So God, I'm just declaring right now that I want to know you more. I want to follow you closely. I want to trust you more. I want to see you move in my life. God, help me to stay committed to what I've made important today. If you just prayed that prayer, listen, I believe this year is going to be an incredible year for you. And right now, you go, I don't really know what to do with that. I don't really know what my next step is. I don't really know where to go. This is what I want to ask you to do in these moments. Before we re-engage in singing and before the band really starts vamping up and playing, I'm going to give you a couple moments right now just to respond on the cards that are in front of you. Every chair in here has a card on the back of it, has a pen on the back of it. I'm asking you just to put your name and put your number, and man, if you've given your life to follow Jesus today, check that off. If you want to get in a group so you can declare and embrace accountability for what you say is important, check off a group or check off a team. Maybe you do want to declare it publicly that you're following Jesus and get baptized. Check that off. Let's take a few moments as a church, maybe about 60 seconds, and let's just take a few moments just to respond on those cards, and then you'll get some instructions on what to do with that. So right now, respond as God's leading you, and then you'll get instructions on how to close out the service.
Thanks for watching today. We don't want you to miss a single message, so I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel so you stay up to date on all that God is doing here. And if you would like to contribute financially to what God is doing through Awaken Church, I want to invite you can give right now by going to awakenchurch.cc or visit the Awaken Church app and you can give there. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.